Welcome to It's a Life Thing, Bridging Pain to Purpose. We're your hosts, Benita Santillanes
and Madeline Figueroa.
On today's episode, The Little T's of Trauma, The Silent Truth, we're joined by our guests,
Katrina Balavlenkov. Katrina has been a licensed social worker for 13 years. She's a professor of social work at Columbia and New York universities and a practicing therapist.
Today's special guest is Brenda Baena. Brenda has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Criminal Justice from UIC. She is a Certified Recovery Support Specialist and a Certified Wellness Recovery Action Plan Facilitator, WRAP for short.
Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at It's a Life Thing.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second episode on The Little T's of Trauma, The Silent Truth. In this episode, we will be uncovering the little T's of trauma, those small things that we don't consider to make an impact on our life, but, they do in dramatic ways. So as you listen, feel free to comment and let's welcome our guest. Go ahead, Maddie.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. So, Benita, before we bring them on into the studio, I wanted to ask you, girl. We're only in our second month. We've got Valentine's Day coming up.
I got the red.
Yes, got my nails done. How you feeling?
I feel great.
Into this episode, yeah.
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this episode. I'm excited about our guests, and we got feedback from the last time. So, it's we're learning, so we're moving forward. Forward is always good.
Yes, we are. So, folks, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest today. So I bring to you Katrina Balavlenkov. She is a friend of mine. Love her to death. She is going to be and has agreed to be a recurring guest whenever we need her. And she's thrown her hat in the therapist bucket for us. So, Katrina, welcome back to the show.
Well,
thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. It's always great hanging out with you ladies.
Appreciate you. It's also my pleasure to introduce you to Brenda Baena. Brenda, welcome, girl.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm great.
Brenda was introduced to us by a mutual friend, Mike Yoquendo. She was gonna actually be our January guest, and we had, of course, technical difficulties, but she wanted to bring her pain to purpose, and we wanted her to be on Pain to Purpose.
Yes.
So we were able to connect, and we're so glad to be able to introduce you to her. She has an amazing story, and she has done some really great work with bridging her pain to purpose. Brenda, yes. welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on this space.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to toss you over to Benita. Benita's going to start us off. And we want to invite our listeners to like, follow, share, and subscribe. And please, please, please engage with us. We've got two great guests, and we want you guys to ask them questions. And we'll put your comments up, and we'll try and get to as many of them as possible. Those that we can't get to, we'll make sure we get to them by the end of the show. Okay? So here we go. Go ahead, Brenda.
Okay. So, Brenda, can you share a little bit about your childhood and family life growing up for the audience?
Now, that's a really good question. How does someone share that, right? But I mean, it was good. It was a good childhood. I always say, I'm like, you know what? I had everything that I needed. I had a roof over my head, food to eat, clothes. I had two parents, two sisters. But as a child, I still felt like something was missing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what was missing until like years later as an adult. And I think a lot of that was I felt unseen and unheard. So even though I felt like I grew up in a decent, family and had a great childhood, I had a lot of things that were difficult to navigate because there was like that chunk missing of like that emotional, like I guess, nurturing or nourishment. So there was a lot of gaps.
So you're saying that when you were younger, there was a lot of times when when you had to be silent. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, what were some of the, like, would you say emotional struggles that you faced as a young person and then going into like your teenage years?
It wasn't so much that I felt like I had to be silent. I felt like that's what you did. That was the norm. So, I mean, I can go back as early, I want to say anywhere between like 6, maybe 7 years old, and just having like chaos just strolling in my mind and not knowing how to navigate that because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what that meant. But it was something that wasn't really like talked about at home. We didn't really like sit down. Nobody like asked me like, oh, you look sad today. Like, what's wrong? It was just, you just kind of dealt with it. So the silence just came with the package. I would find myself, I mean, I have a very vivid like memory, which is probably like a bunch of memories into one, but I would find myself sitting in my room. I would be in my room. I'd be leaning against my bed, knees up, kind of just holding on tight with my head buried between my knees. And I just felt like what I called like this extreme like sadness. And I struggled trying to figure out like what happened? What happened that day? What happened at school? What happened with my friends? Like what was going on that made me feel this extreme sadness? And again, it was just something that was never navigated at home. And now looking back, I mean, I look at when I was little, I'm the youngest of 3. And there was chunks where like my mom was sick, so she was in and out of the hospital. So that kind of created a chaos, right? It was like, well, okay, mom's in the hospital. We got to take her to the doctor's appointment. My dad's now taking time off of work, take care of us. He's trying to navigate that whole aspect. Like, how do I take care of 3 girls? And I just, like now, even when I envision it, I just see this little girl just kind of like, what do I do? Where do I go? You know what I mean? It was just like, wake up, eat, follow whatever's going on, and deal with whatever's going in your head on your own. And no one's going to talk about it. No one's going to ask you. And like even emotionals, like the crying, for example, I had to let whatever I was feeling out somehow. So cry. And I would hide to cry because I felt like people are going to then maybe be like, well, what's wrong? And I didn't know how to answer that. So I would hide, closet. I remember actually I would hide apparently in the bathroom, and I don't remember this clearly, but I was told later that I would cry in the bathroom and tell people that I was practicing. I guess because maybe I was the youngest and I was like spoiled or whatever they say in Spanish is chibirada. And I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, I wasn't practicing. I probably was genuinely crying, but I didn't want to admit it to anybody. So I spent all those years till my teenage years, which you can imagine puberty gets a little chaotic already. All that I carried with me.
Were both of your parents Hispanic?
Yes. Both immigrated from Mexico here. Yes.
Wow. So what was the communication like within the family? What did you see?
I mean, it's like everybody played their role. Kind of like how Maddie said, you know, adults did their adulting and kids did their kid thing. But I think the part that was missing is we didn't communicate that we shared, you know, we're human. And we feel things, and that maybe we do need to talk about it. But, you know, now in retrospect, as an adult, I look back and I can only imagine what my parents went through, you know, immigrating here, navigating that alone. Like, I don't understand that. You know, I was born here, but I can imagine what chaos they had. So if they had their suitcases full of stuff, how are they going to handle my little suitcase? And all I knew was I have this suitcase and I'm just going to carry it with me. And it just kept getting bigger. So communication was amongst adults, and kids stayed on their own. And I kind of just stayed in my corner.
Got it. So you basically coped with the behaviors by going in the bathroom and crying and kind of holding a lot of things in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have this story of when I used to run away. Well, Well, I'll put it in quotes, run away. It's kind of like a cute story, but really not.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually draw a map, right? I would draw a map of where I would go. So that alone tells you that I'm screaming, come find me. So I'm drawing a map. I write my letter that I'm running away. I'd either hide in the closet, or there would be times where I would step out. Again, I don't know the age, right? It's everything just as in memories. Anywhere between 7, maybe 9 years old. And there's this one time I remember I had a little kid umbrella. So it was like this little umbrella, and it was kind of drizzling, and I'm like, I'm running away. I don't know what happened that day that caused this like internal chaos and to make me feel like I am leaving. Nobody cares. I was like, I'm out, I'm out. And so I remember stepping out the front door, and our house was the second one on the block. So I didn't really go that far. I went to the first house around the corner, and I stood alongside of the house, and I waited. Because I'm like, someone's going to come get me. They're going to find my note. They're going to see my map. They maybe saw me storm out. Someone's going to come get me. But now as an adult, when I relive that story, no one came to find me. Right. I went back by myself. Right. No one to this day ever came to get me. And so, again, you add that to that suitcase. You add that to that baggage. And now I still kind of have those feelings when, like, someone leaves me on red or someone doesn't call me. No one came to find me.
Yeah. I got a question for you from there. When you went back, you had your experience in retrospect when you were more of an adult and you knew had a little bit more understanding. Did you ever ask them, did you ever find a note? And did you ever come look for me? And did they ever say like, why? Because in our household, I can imagine, well, no, you wanted to be independent, and we were basically letting you be to see how independent you would be. So like for them, it would be like, here is a learning opportunity for her. But did you ever have that opportunity to say, did you ever find the note, or have you always assumed that they had read the note?
So I waited years to ask. Again, because I didn't think that story still affected me.
Right.
Because it comes out later, there's situations, right? It just comes out like, hello, I'm here. And so it must have been, maybe, let's say 5 or 6 years ago. So just recently, technically. It was through a therapy session, and I was discussing certain things, and that story came out. And so she suggested, why don't you ask your mom? Like, ask your mom why. So I did. And she just said, you know what? I thought you were playing. And it seemed really innocent. And that moment when she's like, I just thought you were playing, I felt so much better in that moment. Yeah. But it only lasted for so long because I sat there sitting at the kitchen table, and she's like, yeah, I thought you were playing. So I didn't, again, adults don't play, right? Let her play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I asked her, I'm like, okay, but why didn't you play with me? And she was washing dishes, and she froze. She turned around, and she's like, I don't know. And that's where that conversation ended. She didn't know why she didn't play. And unfortunately, I can't ask her anymore. She passed away 4 years ago, and that's
condolences. Condolences.
Yes.
Katrina, that being said, you've been listening to her story and whatnot, and you've heard the nuances of adults being adults and kids being kids, and how it kind of carried her for a while. As a parent, in your professional opinion, what types of things should they be making themselves aware of self and then of their children? And you had mentioned in our previous episode, you had talked about the ACEs. So can you touch about that, and how does that factor into the example that Brenda just gave us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story, first of all. I think it's really brave and really important that we put ourselves out there. And I had so many thoughts. And one of the first thing that just came to my mind was like this first gen parenting. right? Because you're using old world parenting methods in a new world place.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So that cultural difference, right? Even being if you were raised with other kids who were being raised like you, right? Or you had this different sense of community, but there's this immigrant experience. And then there's, it's like having one foot in each world. You know, and with having that one foot in each world, sometimes you just don't know where you belong.
Right.
Yeah. So, I was definitely kind of thinking that with that story. I was also thinking, so much about, what we would consider with your mom being sick is experiencing sort of this vicarious medical trauma, right? So healthcare can be traumatic. And when you're young and you don't know what's going on, that trauma passes on to you. So you start carrying grown-up problems, but nobody's talking to you about these grown-up problems.
Yes.
Right? A way we can break down big issues to age-appropriate levels, which is also a very new way, right? That's like the new wave parenting, and talking about that. And I think, we were talking about in regards to our ACEs or our adverse childhood experiences, right? And I think a lot of times when we think about trauma, it's really that life overwhelms our coping skills, right? A trauma response is completely normal. Your body just went to a place where it didn't know what to do, right? And so when we know that there are other risk factors associated with ACEs, right? Loss or separation of a parent. We talk about physical, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse. We talk about racism and discrimination in growing up in different environments. There's so much that plays into it. Right. And I think, there's just this place where we have to honor that sometimes our parents did the best they did, even if they didn't do a very good job.
Yeah.
Got it. Bonita?
So, Brenda, again, when you were talking about that, hiding in the bathroom and curling up on the side of your bed and stuff, with those, how would I say? I don't want to say behaviors and stuff, but those experiences that you went through and how to handle those things, how did that influence going forward in your adult life, in, college, high school, that influence your self-worth and your relationships with others?
It's a very packed question. I mean, to this day, I feel like I'm very hyper dependent. I used to be like super proud of being independent, but I'm like, no, I'm a little too much. And it comes from that. It comes from, I took care of me. Like sometimes I talk to people and they're like, do you have a family? I'm like, yeah. But the way I describe some stuff, it's like, well, where were they? Because you talk like everything that you felt or been through was by yourself. I'm like, well, that's how it felt. So as I carried on, it just made it harder to navigate. Like I shut down even to this day, which is something that I'm working on. I shut down so quickly on stuff.
So when conflict happens, or when conflict happens, or is it when you feel like you want to be heard? So instead of being heard, like when you were a child, you were told to like go away. Is that how you still now go through that? When you want to speak about something, you kind of reserve yourself?
I want to say I'm at like 80% now, because I am very proud that I have found my voice, and I have not shut up since. And I do not
thank God.
And that just happened. That just happened. And it happened after my mom passed, right? I was like, it's my turn. I'm going to do this better. But yeah, I mean, I'm still breaking those habits. It's those layers that have just built over the years. Like once I chisel one, another one pops up. So like whenever there's conflict, I'm like, nope. Whenever I feel like no one heard me, even if they literally maybe just didn't hear me and I just needed to be louder, I'm like, and it's so hard for me to get up from that. And that's why like I love talking about this so much, because I'm a grown woman now, and man, like I had visions when I was a little kid. I had dreams of what my life was going to look like, and I'm like still striving for that. but I'm so tired of being on survival mode. I'm here for thriving mode. So I'm going to talk about it because it heals me. And I'm going to talk about it because I know there's a 15-year-old, I know there's a 7-year-old out there who's like, wait a minute. I relate. What can I do? Because you can do something. And I wish I had someone saying this to me so I could have done it sooner.
Yeah. And so what were the behaviors that you started to do when you weren't able to process your emotions when you were older? Like, what were your coping mechanisms as a high school teenager, things like that?
So in high school, like I said, it got a little more complicated with, going through puberty and whatnot. That's just already kind of an interesting time.
Damn hormones.
Yeah.
But and even that, like, so many things aren't discussed at home. Like, even supposedly I had the sex talk. I'm like, no, I didn't.
Right.
You don't do it. That was the talk. Just don't do it.
Nothing is spoken
about. And I'm like trying to figure things out. So for me, it got really difficult. Like 15 was a turning point because again, just like that little 7-year-old who was leaning in against her bed crying. And believe it or not, I didn't know then, but in retrospect, I'm like, I had suicidal ideation as a 7-year-old. And I had it still as a 15-year-old because I was still on the floor crying and trying to figure out why. I was like, okay, what happened in school? Did I get in a fight with someone? What happened? I just didn't feel like my worth was, it didn't exist. I felt this darkness, I felt this heaviness, but at the same time, I felt like the real authentic Brenda was inside and she was trying to get out, but something was over her. She's like, and I was fighting and it was getting exhausting. And when I couldn't figure out what was going on, I just would shut down. I stayed in my room. I wrote in journals. I wrote other letters and I would fold them up. Again, I think purposely because I wanted someone to find them. I would write on the window pane. I remember I wrote ones, feeling lonely in a world full of people. And my mom saw it. My mom found the letters, painted over the window pane, got the letters, tore them up. And I asked her, and she was like, I just didn't know what to do. So I think for her, it was, if I just get rid of it and I pray, it'll go away. But it didn't. And it didn't so much that, and we didn't speak about it so much that one night I did go into the medicine cabinet and I was like, I'm done. And I'll leave it at that, right? I'll leave it at that. I ended up in the emergency room. I'm here to tell my story. But it got to that point where I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to stop. And the thing was that after that night we spent at the emergency room, I can't tell you we ever sat down and talked about it. I was 15.
Wow. And then why were you in the emergency room?
I tried to overdose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katrina.
Yeah.
Heavy. So,
yeah, there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah. So the theme. What can they say, those that are in the process of finding their voice, adolescent, preteen, high school, college, and parents and guardians, what should they be looking for when seeing their kids' behavior change or something being off?
It's so interesting because I'm actually working with someone right now, and one of her concerns was her son's depression and trying to get him to engage in care. And one, I think that's a really new thing. I don't think we screened or really talked about childhood mental health, right? It seems like maybe Brenda was suffering from depression, right? And nobody picked it up, right? It might not have been a trauma response, but it might have been this sense of having nowhere to go, right? Because I always say as a therapist, we're in the business of hope.
Yes.
And, if we give people hope, if we, believe that people can change, right? There's so much there, right? There's that possibility if we can get people to hope. You know, when it comes to talking to people's families, we talk about family systems theory.
Right.
Family system theory, we think about the family as sort of this structure. So I don't know if you ever played the game Mousetrap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to put the marble in, and you have to follow this very complicated thing to get to the bottom for the net to drop, right? So if you think about the person in family systems therapy, we often think about that ball as the person with the problem. But really, we don't have to change the ball. If we change the mousetrap, if we change the structure of that game in any way, we're going to have a very different outcome. So what we're talking about is not making it a person problem, but a family systems issue, right? Because having someone who's depressed in your family, especially if it's a child, it's going to impact the rest of the family because you care, even if you don't know what to do. And then if you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say. But, you know, the biggest thing I tell people is, you know, adolescents are great to talk to in cars because they don't have to make eye contact. You know, that was a strategy when I worked with youth on probation that we often use. We just take them on a ride, and they're much more open when there's music playing and they don't have to make eye contact. Right. The use of art therapy, play therapy, somatic therapy, right, to help kids. Somatic theory is like things about living in your body. Yeah. Right. There's ways to teach kids to coping with that. And then, you know, also thinking that we talk about asking open-ended questions, right? So what's going on with you? A closed question is like a yes, no, a 1-point answer. You know, did you have a good day in school? Yes or no. Is very different than tell me about school today.
Got it.
Right?
Right.
You know, what's going on with that girl you broke up with? Why are you still talking to her? You know, wow, it sounds like you're in a really confusing place with this person. You know, what's going on? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, trying to make that difference. And then I think the other thing that really spoke to me is this idea of talking about, you know, this hyper independence and shutting down and not making space for other people as we think about boundary work.
Right.
Right. And boundaries can be concrete, right? They can be flexible, or they can be Swiss cheese.
Right.
Right. And we don't want concrete, and we don't want Swiss cheese either. Right. So there's this great book, and I refer it to people all the time, and it's called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, a guide to reclaiming yourself. And this author should give me royalties because I recommend this book to everybody. But it talks about how to have boundaries in different relationships and how to maintain that flexibility so that there's this give and take, so that you don't get placed in where you have this like avoidant attachment style where you're scared to let people in.
Got it. Thank you so much. Benita?
So I have another question for Katrina real quick. As you were talking, what made me think about her story was when a person is that young, or even, how can I say, like high school age, what would be somewhere or someone they can go to that would be a safe place if they don't have family to talk to or friends?
I mean, a school guidance counselor is always a great place to start. You know, a lot of schools have social workers embedded in them. Social workers are the #1 providers of mental health therapy in the United States. We're everywhere. We are. Yes, we are the #1 provider of mental health services in the U.S. You know, so always find a social worker. They're there. You know, always look for one. You know, it also can be a family friend or a relative, a teacher, someone you trust, right? When you feel like you can't go to your parents, that's okay. There's other people who listen. You know, adolescents can also reach out to their pediatricians.
Yeah.
You know, they can call their own doctors, but unfortunately, we don't do the type of screening that we need to do with children, and we don't teach them the words about mental wellness. I wish all parents were trained in mental health first aid.
Yeah.
Especially in today's,
Yeah.
right? In today's today. But thinking about that as different ways to do that and encouraging parents to take mental health first aid training, because it's just a complicated place for kids these days.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's
Thank
true.
you so much. Bonita?
So, Katrina, I'm sorry, not Katrina, Brenda, back to you. When we talked before off, when we were actually talking to you, when did you realize that you needed help? Can you talk about the little incident with the scuba diving, that when you started to realize those little T's of trauma?
Oh, I know. So actually, so that story with the scuba diving is more when I realized I can do more. But when I was 15 is when I realized, and I say by the grace of God, yeah, because I remember the day. Again, probably found myself in my room crying, trying to figure out why. And I love what my therapist has taught me about feelings aren't facts, because I try to find evidence to show me why.
Say that again. Feelings what?
Aren't facts.
Aren't facts.
Yeah. So like the way I translate it is, I feel the way I feel and it's valid, but maybe what caused that feeling isn't how I'm not translating it correctly, right? Mm-hmm. So I was just trying to find evidence of why I was feeling. And I got to a point, obviously suicide attempt. We're not talking. I just, in my head, I came up with a grand old idea that I needed therapy. And I don't even know where I got that idea from. Mm-hmm. I'm just assuming shows that I watched on TV that talked about therapy or something, because it was definitely not something we talked about at home. But I went into the kitchen and I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, I need to see a therapist. She kind of looked at me like a deer in headlights, like, well, why? And I couldn't explain it to her. I was just like, I don't know. I feel the way I feel. I don't like it. And I think I need someone to help me figure that out, because I guess in my own way, I knew that no one was going to help me here. So I needed someone else. And yeah, I started my therapy sessions on my second one, I believe, after I don't know how it works exactly, but the evaluation, my therapist said something similar to what Katrina said, pretty much saying okay, it doesn't look like you, something happened, but we can talk about it and work through it. She's like, it seems like there could be some history here. We went into family history, and straightforward, she diagnosed me with chronic major depression. And in that moment, I felt so relieved, right? I felt so relieved because I was like, there's a name to it. We can fix this. Let's do it. What do I got to do? How many times do I have to be here? But that feeling lasted so long, because all of a sudden, I'm a nerd. I started doing my own research, even at 15. I was going to the library. Gave me materials to read to understand what does chronic depression mean. She's talking about chemical imbalance, medication. I'm just now I'm oh wait, I have to see a psychiatrist. Oh wait, I have a mental illness. That good feeling went away with that, because now I'm labeled. I've labeled myself. Again, we're not really.
Back then, labels were labels.
Yeah. They were bad.
It felt like I was the one with the problem, right? Little Brendita with this illness that we gotta now take her every week to see the doctor. I felt like a burden even more, to the point that I actually stopped going to therapy at one point, because it was do you think you still need to go? Are you done yet? And I took that as, I'm not, but I will be. And I told my therapist I wasn't coming back, and I stopped going until I actually had my learner's permit and can drive myself.
Good for you, Bonita.
So as you were going through this process and stuff, what would you say was the turning point for you on your journey to wellness and healing?
So I had two. One is a scuba trip, but I'll get to this other one first that I like sharing, because I don't know how this might happen, but it was 2 years after that. I was 17, and I'm not a big into religion, but I'm very spiritual. I believe in a higher power, and I don't know where. I don't know where. I sat up in my bed, and I always believed in God, but I didn't believe He was for me. but I knew he existed. I was just like, he's mad at me or something. But for some reason, that in that moment, I sat up and I'm like, I'm going through all of this and still surviving. I'm helping myself get through this. There has to be a reason. God has a purpose for me. I didn't know what it was at that time. I was 17. I was just like, all right, let's do this. And then as years progressed, even though they still were rocky, but there was a year, I believe it was 2006, I went on a scuba trip. And scuba diving, at that point, I was like in this good space in my life that I was like, I can do anything. I was best for everything. And my sister invited me on a scuba trip. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but let's go. Until I Googled it and I was like, oh, that's what it is.
I might have some limitations.
Right? But I was all hyped. I'm like, no, we do this. So I'm on this trip and we start the class. And the first class is, you know, you put on all your gear. You do short entry, so we're walking to the beach. We're walking backwards with our little flippers and whatnot. And the instructor's like, we're gonna just drop to our knees real quick, get used to the breathing underwater. And I'm like, okay, no problem. The moment I did that, heart starts racing, anxiety starts pushing. If you already suffer from anxiety, it's gonna be hard to scuba dive.
I can imagine. Yes.
It's on you. So I kept popping up. And then after the instructor, I got to give it to him. He was like, take your time. But after a while, he's like, I got to proceed with my class. So he came back up from the water and told me, he's like, take as much time as you need, but I have to start my class. And that's what got me a little bit, because as I stood there in the water with all my gear, remember that I told all my friends I was going scuba diving. I'm in this beautiful island, but I'm staring at like the water and like no land to be seen at one point. I was like, where do I find this middle? And I just had this little pep talk with myself. I was like, Brenda, you've been through your own darkness. You've been through whatever trenches and you made it out, and you made it out on your own.
Yes.
You freaking scuba dive. And you know what? I scuba dived. I have 8 dives.
Yes.
I saw barracudas. I saw sea turtles. And now every time I feel a challenge, I'm like, you've crossed this line before. Keep going.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
So I'm going to open this one up to like all 4 of us. I've been talking on and off with everybody about this in separate conversations. I just turned 60 and I'm hearing how young things start, because I myself have my own full set of baggage, as my sister would probably. I've got the trunk and everything; it all matches. Louis Vuitton, of course. But anyway, but one of the things that I want to highlight, and Katrina, I'll kind of toss it to you, and maybe you can add some light to it, is I had like one last life lesson at 58, but it all kind of had to do with so much that I carried and kept adding into certain situations for it to finally be like, okay, I finally have unpacked it all. But I carried it for like 40 and 50 years. And my body's paid for it with illnesses and stress and my own little attempts like that. What can we do to lessen the amount of time that we're carrying loads like that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Hold on. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I had you muted. I'm sorry.
I have so many thoughts. I really do about that. So, this idea of holding on to our past, right? Sometimes it serves a purpose. Sometimes we need it. Sometimes it's that security blanket, right? Sometimes it reminds us what we can do and what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. The idea is when it becomes overwhelming, there's a couple techniques I think about. Like I talk about the rule of 5s with my clients, that depending upon the severity of the event is how long you get to be upset about it. So you can do 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years, right? And gauge it. So if this is the worst thing that happened today, am I still okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we reframe that, then our bodies are used to being uncomfortably comfortable for a long time. You have to be really, really uncomfortable to make a change.
Yeah.
So would you say, when you say that when a person is used to trauma, it also becomes a norm, and it doesn't have to be a trauma that, like what Brenda was saying, where it's an accident or something like that, but it could just be the silence. So that becomes normal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Why zebra? I like that.
I'm geeking out too, Brenda, right? I'm a book nerd. But the idea is that our bodies evolved for peaks and valleys in stress. We needed to find food. We were fine. We needed to outrun the lion. We were fine. Right. But that's not the way today modern society works. We go up, but we never get that true lull at the bottom. There's this white noise that's going on. Right. So that we don't get that full cathartic release. And the idea is to figure out how to quiet that white noise, and breathing, somatic therapy, doing things like EMDR or accelerated response therapy. There are these ideas that we need to reprocess these experiences, and they call it restoring. So when we can restore from the victim to the hero, for thinking about how, if we wanted a situation to go, like, thinking about the visualization of, like, Brenda saying, no, you go get in the corner, and neither of you get to come out until you know how to talk to me. Right.
Yeah.
So it's re-imaging and re-storytelling that we help ourselves, become centered. And, if you want to be very Zen about it, Buddha said you can pick joy or you can pick sorrow.
True.
There you go.
Yep. Yes. So Brenda, I'm going to ask you this question with Katrina, with what she said. I know you've gone through a lot of your healing and a lot of everything like that. So my question to you is, how have you turned your pain into your purpose? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, currently just sharing my story and in what I do, I got, certified to be in recovery support. So I support my peers that are going through a mental health journey. Not so much like I sit and I tell them my story, but we sit and I be with them and I listen, and I'm able to share bits of my successes, even my failures, and what I've been through and what I felt, so they in that moment don't feel alone. And whether it's through work or whether it's through social media, I mean, and honestly, anyone who will listen, I want to be heard, and I'll share my story because it heals me. It heals me, but I've also seen the impact that it does when I do share that story. When I am in front of high school students, middle school students, in front of parents, even. Like, parents are actually one of my favorite audience, because I'm now speaking to, like, my family. I'm speaking to my parents. I mean, like, I can't speak as a mom, but I'm going to speak to you as a child, and maybe what I share will definitely help you. Being a caregiver, I mean, I was my mom's caregiver, so I can say it's difficult and we often forget about ourselves, but I share that reminder of, like, take care of you so you can take care of others. And that's pretty much, honestly, I think that that's what God saved me for. He's like, you know what, I built you so you can handle all this, and now share it with others, so they have kind of a roadmap that they can start off with and create their own.
Awesome. Katrina,
that's really important. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Maddie.
No, I was going to ask Katrina, based on what she just talked about, back to the other side of that coin, right? As a professor now, you're looking at your audience, your student audience, right? There's certain things that you're teaching, but as a professor, what would you tell that student, or what would you maybe tell that student's parent, or or guardian, what do you communicate? Hearing what you're hearing from how it's impacting kids, what you know. How do you go after those kids and let them know it's okay to start healing?
Right.
Well, one of the beautiful things is I'm teaching future social workers. So I get to teach people how to help and support other people and to help them facilitate their own journeys, right? So I love that I'm bringing these kind of, humans into the field because they're just wonderful people, and I think, we do, some of my students are parents, and some of my students, have been raised by parents that maybe weren't always as available to them. And we talk about a lot of personal growth, and social work programs are very inward centered as well as outward centered. And, we talk about that, I jokingly call it, please keep your personal baggage to one carry-on item only. Right?
Okay.
Right.
That's a good one.
I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Good
But
one.
knowing when it's okay to put it down.
Yeah.
You can come back to it. It's not going away. If you
Right.
need it, it will always be there.
Right.
But give yourself permission to put it down just even for 5 minutes and see what that feels like. If
Good.
you're not ready, pick it back up. That's okay. But just practice putting it down longer and longer until you're ready to unpack that.
Thank you.
So, okay. Brenda, how do you stay grounded now and continue your growth despite any setbacks or challenges? Because healing is a lifetime journey that we all go through. And as we grow and we heal from certain things, it's almost like an onion that gets unraveled the deeper that we go till we get to like the core. So how do you navigate that now? Like, what are the things that you do to stay grounded?
So I'm definitely someone who always says, I feel my feels. I allow myself to feel whatever I'm feeling. But I'm not going to stay there. I'm not going to live there because I used to do that. So if I'm having a bad day, I am going to feel it. I will take a seat, cry if I have to. I like to be creative. Sometimes just creating content, helps me. I've been more structured, like with the rap plan. Like I have my own rap plan where I'm like, oh, I've been able to discover random little things that help me stay well. And one of my favorite that I like to share, and I may have shared with you this one before, is washing the dishes. Like having a clean sink is just, I don't know, it just feels good. And I never connected it to my wellness, but it's definitely an indicator. And when I see that sink piling up, I see those plates getting onto the counter, I need to check myself. I was like, oh, I like to have a clean sink, but I'm not taking care of me. I'm not taking care of my daily activities. Let me take a seat and figure out what's going on. If I can't figure out what's going on, that's okay. All I have to do is make a step. And I make a step, whether it's just standing up, then I make another step, going to the kitchen, washing one dish. Maybe I wash them all. Maybe I don't. Yeah. And regardless how far I go, I always gave it 100%. If I washed one dish or I washed all of them, it was my 100% at that time. And I give myself grace that I'm doing the best that I can. And I just remember that. It's like wash, rinse, and repeat. I just keep doing that over and over and over. I'm human. I'm gonna feel sad. I'm gonna have my moments, and that's why, like now, I say that vulnerability is my superpower. I will be vulnerable day, because if I'm not feeling it, I'm gonna be back to that 7-year-old in the sitting next to her bed crying and thinking she doesn't want to be here, and I'm not going back to that.
Yes. That is so true. I know a lot of times, well, when we met you, you were actually running. That's something that you do too, running and being out there. What are some other things?
Dancing. I know she does dancing, right?
Yeah. So you know what's fun? Okay, so yeah, I do running, and it's funny. I always share that I don't like running, but it's that conquering that challenge. It's being out there in my mind and just doing the thing. Dancing. Funny story. I've danced all my life. I mean, I feel like if you're Latina, that's what you do, right? You don't take classes. You just dance. Who needs to teach me? But But I signed up for a class in January of 2023 because it was a year after my mom passed, and it was like, I'm dealing with all the stuff, like the house, the estate, just all that chaos. And I'm like, I need to do me. It's like I got lost in that mess. And one of my friends shared that she's taking this dance class. I'm like, it sounds like fun. And like, if I just schedule one class, having something on my calendar that I have to go to at a certain time is going to get me out of the house, because I wasn't getting out of the house. I signed up for one class January 2023, and my heart just filled, because that movement, we all know movement is healing. And I was just overjoyed, and I'm talking to people, I'm doing, dancing with different partners, because that's what you had to do in the class. I ended up 5 classes a week, like in, I think, was it March?
Wow.
You had time to make up for.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, this is one thing I learned about dancing, because especially because you had to dance with different people, I needed to disconnect to reconnect with myself. And I was doing that also with each partner. I'm like, well, I need to learn how to dance with each person. I have to disconnect with one, reconnect with the other one for the moves. And that was like, internally, I was disconnecting to reconnect back with who I was. And the newfound Brenda after losing her mom, because guess what? You're not the same person.
Nope.
Yes. Now, Katrina, I have a question for you regarding with what she said. Is there a connection between when a person gets in a place of being stuck, I guess you would say, in that maybe depression stage, where movement actually does something to the brain? Is there something from like a therapist or a medical point of view that points to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so much we know about physical activity and the endorphins and the energy that it helps give us, the dopamine response, because we feel good after we've done something, and when you're really in a funk and you can't even think about getting out of the door somewhere, just get a shower. Just engage in the most basic amount of self-care. Walk to the bathroom, get your bath, get your shower.
Yes.
And you started. And I noticed we've got some blessings from Edwin and Kay.
Yes, I saw that.
Very kind. Elena had some very nice things to say about social workers, so thank you for that. And Rich wants to be on your show.
Yes.
So it'd be remiss if I didn't thank everybody for turning in and hearing our stories and being a part of this with us. It definitely, I think it enhances the connection, and it allows us, the more people we're able to connect with, the more we're able to bring our best selves to you.
Yes, absolutely. So are there anything final thoughts that you would like to say, Brenda, to anybody out there that's listening or that will hear this, that might be in your situation?
I always say, like, you're seen, you are heard. It might be hard to see that in that moment because it gets really foggy. But like I said, feelings aren't facts. And it's okay to feel the way you feel. And it's valid even if someone says it's not. You know what? Like, you're the expert of your wellness. You may not know it now, but with grace and time, I don't know, I feel confident that you will. I found mine. And just keep it moving, keep it going. It's definitely worth the trip.
We had a question come up from Gleaning Lady about your triggers. What would be triggers for you?
Like, specifically?
Or like maybe in the past, what were triggers for you?
I think it goes back to, like, if someone misunderstood me, and it could be something so basic. And
she meant trigger management. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, she clarified trigger management.
The trigger management, like when you get triggered, how do you manage those triggers? Thank you, Gleaning Lady.
I want to change the word real quick, Brenda, before you answer that question. Okay. Triggers is violent. We call them activations now. So taking away from that
Oh,
place of violence, we talk about our brain being activated, right?
got
It's a
it.
normal, healthy response. It's not being held at gunpoint. This is your body taking care of you. So think about activation management.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
New
for that.
term. Thank you.
I never knew that.
No, it's funny. We in our rap class, we call them stressors. We don't use the word trigger as well. But yeah, so for me, it goes back to the like feeling whatever I feel and sit with it a little bit. But like lately, especially in my I'm very intentful in my healing journey at the moment. So I'm getting really triggered because I'm putting myself out there to really get like what I feel like I deserve in life. So I get triggered. What I do, and it goes to something that Katrina said about like the 5 minutes, that was told to me a while back by one of my therapists, was step back for a second, wait 5 minutes, see how you feel. And then I've been learning about my like nervous system response, which that was a huge game changer. So anytime that something happens where I'm like, oh, I was like, hold up, I'm going to process this. And for anyone out there who's probably seen that for me, where all of a sudden, like, where'd Brenda go? Like, I saw her react, but she like disappeared. I'm processing. I rather process now, and I do this at work. I do this with friends. I do this with family. I do it with whoever. I have to step back and be like, why did that make my body feel that way? What is behind it? And sometimes I can figure it out, and then I process that. And I'm like, okay, that's little Brenda being hurt, or that's teenage Brenda. And sometimes I can't figure out what. Either way, I just sit back, I process. I'm like, did that person actually try to hurt me? Did that person try to say something to make me feel that way? And if they did, we'll handle it, right? But if they didn't, which a lot of the times isn't the case, because I grew up in a home where passive aggressiveness was the go-to. Getting defensive, oh my gosh, like the arguments that should have just been conversations, I refuse to have that. So now it's
Panic 101.
Yeah. So no, I take my moment, and you'll hear this a lot. I'm like, I had to process, and I say that with everyone. I'm like, oh, sorry, I've been MIA. I had to process, and then now I'm trying to have actual conversations with people. I'm like, can we discuss this? In my process, is that cool with you? Yeah. Because I have to ask. Some people might be like, no, I don't want to. I'm like, okay. Then I process again and be like, they don't want to talk about it. I need to be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts, Katrina?
I just think this has been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you, Brenda, for sharing so much.
Yes.
I am a big fan of putting yourself in timeout. I think it's a beautiful and wonderful thing to do. I put myself in timeout all the time, just to allow yourself to recenter. So I encourage that to people, to take yourself physically out of the space, because it changes the dynamic. And I just think, we got to keep having these conversations. I've got more ideas about talking about how people evolve and change. And it's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing your story, Brenda.
Yes,
Brenda, I'm sorry, Benita, I didn't mean to jump in. I just wanted to share that Stephanie.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Stephanie Gutierrez, thank you for trusting us with your story. Definitely takes a lot of strength to share something so personal, and I admire your courage. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Go ahead, Benita. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you.
No, that's what I was going to say too. I was going to do the same thing, but we're at the mark right now, so we're going to close up. Final question is basically in 30 seconds, what have you taken away today? So I'll start first, then we'll go to Brenda, and then Katrina, and then we'll end with Madeline, and we'll close out. I learned that new word, that it's not trigger, it's activated. And I appreciate that, because honestly, the word trigger always triggers me, and I can't stand it. I hate that word. Oh, you're triggered? Yes, I am. Don't say triggered to me. So I really appreciate that. And Brenda, thank you for sharing your story. And I just want to say that I'm so proud of you for how you have really turned your pain into purpose. And I'm not trying to make that a cliche, but really how you've taken something that we don't, that's my thing to work out, sorry. But how you have actually taken your what you've been through, what people don't think of as a major trauma. Silence, when you're not able to speak your voice, that does affect us. So thank you so much for sharing your story. But I took so much away from that.
Yeah, I appreciate that too.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thank you for the space to be able to do this. Like I've mentioned, I've been itching to do this. And my takeaway is that as I've been slowly in my healing journey and in this new career transition of like, you know, supporting my peers and being vulnerable, I've noted the people who are hearing and seeing me, and like, it feels really good that I am being seen and I am being heard, and I'm not shutting up anytime soon. I'm here for myself, and I'm here for everybody that felt that way at one point. We got this for sure.
Yes. Yes. Katrina?
I think if there's one message I want people to take with them, it's you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
I had a therapist tell me that a very long time ago, and you are exactly where you are supposed to be, and trust your process.
Thank you. Thank you. For me, it was when Katrina said that life gets so overwhelming and we don't have the coping skills. I know I'm not paraphrasing you correctly, but even as an adult, we get to a point where life be lifing and we don't know how to deal with it because we may never have dealt with it before. Given the state of mind with right now with everything political and there's a lot of people that are stressed out that have never encountered this kind of stress before. Yeah. So you don't have those coping skills. So don't be mad at yourself. Just take a breath and go to those basic things. Either take a shower or do those 5 things. Step away for 5 minutes, yes. 5 hours, 5 days. That's what I took away from today's show.
Yes, yes.
So go ahead, babe.
No, I was just saying thank you.
Yes. So we are going to be wrapping up. We just want to thank everyone for joining us. And for our second episode, we are blessed that you are here with us and for all the comments. And again, like, follow, and share. And don't forget to, when we put this out on YouTube, to actually, you can post in the comments or on our Facebook page any other episodes that you would like to hear us talk about, any suggestions. We're definitely looking for suggestions. Natty?
Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you for watching It's a Life Thing, Bridging Pain to Purpose. We're your hosts, Benita Santillanes
and Madeline Figueroa. Contact us at ialt.p2p@gmail.com.
Thank you to our guest, Brenda Baena. For more information on Brenda's story and booking information, visit her website at brendabmentalwealth.com. And we encourage you to follow Brenda's Instagram account at brendabmentalwealth and her email, booking@brendabmentalwealth.com.
We'd also like to thank Katrina Balavlenkov. You can contact Katrina at thefutureisours.kb@gmail.com.
Don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and Instagram at It's a Life Thing.
Mark your calendars for Wednesday, March 12th from 8 to 9 p.m. Central. We'll be introducing you to another amazing soul, listening to their story, and discussing how they bridge their pain to purpose.
We'll be waiting for you.